Hello, everyone. We've got a spicy lineup discussing the top 10 infamous VA disabilities. We're diving deep into 10 different conditions, unpacking the mysteries of getting these bad boys service connected and how the VA rates them. Before we jump in, don't forget to hammer the comments section, share thoughts, and ask questions. Now, to kick things off, we're starting with a crowd favorite, which is hearing issues. Hearing loss and tinnitus. Those are the big ones, affecting vets from every era. It's not all gunfire and explosions. Sometimes it's just your day to day, from roaring aircraft engines to those non-stop ear-busting noises. It's a widespread issue. Typically, these conditions snag a 10% rating, which is pretty standard across the board for how things are judged. Why 10%, you ask? Well, it comes down to how the VA plays the rating game. They look at stuff like speech issues, basically, how well you can still make out what people are saying, which can still be rated from 0 to hero, 100% that is. Then there's the pure tone threshold, fancy talk for the quietest noise you can pick up on half the time. But here's the kicker. Just because your doc says you're losing your hearing doesn't mean it'll pass the VA muster. It's got to meet specific criteria to meet disability by the VA standards. And let's chat about tinnitus for a sec. It's all about what you report. No fancy tests needed. Just your word on those ringing bells in your ears. Did you know there's a third musketeer in the hearing loss trio we stumbled upon? It's called labyrinthitis, a real dizzying condition that can throw your balance off kilter. Inner ear troubles like these can often go misdiagnosed or misunderstood. So, if you're experiencing any weird symptoms, throw your hat in the ring and file a claim. It's not just about what's diagnosed, it's about what you're feeling. The VA's duty is to figure out if your symptoms tie back to your service. PTSD. I wasn't too shocked about these being at the top of the charts since noisy environments are pretty much a staple in military life. Rated to take on the third spot is PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. Technically speaking, PTSD is up there on one of the top conditions veterans face, and it's no surprise why. PTSD is a mental health condition that usually kicks in after a stressful or traumatic event, especially during active duty. You've got about a million, maybe more veterans who are service connected for PTSD, and when you throw in other mental health conditions, that number jumps to around 1.7 million. So yeah, PTSD is a big chunk of the VA's mental health related cases. To get service connected for PTSD, we're really looking for the usual suspects: an in-service event that was stressful or traumatic, a current PTSD diagnosis, and a clear link or nexus, if need be, between your PTSD and that in-service event. But here's the kicker. You'll need to back up that stressful event with evidence, like an affidavit or a lay statement. That's what really helps seal the deal. Now let's bust the myth. PTSD isn't just for combat related events. A lot of folks think that's the only way you can get PTSD service connected, but that's not the case. We've seen plenty of veterans with PTSD from non combat related events like military sexual trauma, which has nothing to do with combat but can absolutely lead to a PTSD diagnosis. Another important point: even if a veteran has a PTSD diagnosis, they might still have another diagnosable mental health condition. So you're not just limited to PTSD. There are plenty of incidents that could cause a mental health condition, and they don't all involve combat. So don't think you're out of the running just because you weren't in a combat zone. Sometimes veterans get confused when they have multiple diagnoses like depression, anxiety, and PTSD, but they're only getting one rating. That's because the VA's rating system lumps all mental health conditions under the same diagnostic code. So even if you've got a few different diagnoses, you're only going to get one rating for your overall mental health condition. And let's not forget, 100% for mental health conditions do happen, and they're actually more common than you might think, especially when it comes to serious mental health issues. Fourth most common VA disability is scars. And no, not the dramatic, battle worn kind of epic gunfights, though those do count too. We're talking about the less glamorous kind, the ones you earn after a surgeon's scalpel takes a victory lap on your back or knee post surgery. Yep, Those scars are just as common among veterans, making them a frequent service-connected disability. But here's the kicker. The VA isn't exactly throwing out high ratings for scars like candy on Halloween. Scoring more than a 0% rating requires your scars to meet some tough criteria. We're talking multiple scars that are either painful or unstable. And by unstable, I mean the skin over the scar is having a hard time holding it together. If you have just one scar from surgery, you might get a 10% rating, if you're lucky. What's wild is that scars aren't rated by where they are on your body, but by how many you've got. Kind of a numbers game, right? Now, if we're talking about facial scars, those get special treatment. The VA considers how visible and impactful they are. But if your scars aren't causing much pain or don't mess with your daily life, don't be surprised if the VA drops a big fat 0% rating on you. Scars from skin conditions get a bit of a different treatment too, where the VA might look at how much of your body is affected. The fifth most common VA disability is limited flexion of the knees. Limitation of flexion is just the VA speak of how much you can bend your knee. This one's a biggie amongst veterans. The VA looks at how far you can move your knee toward your body and doles out ratings based on that movement. How common are musculoskeletal conditions among veterans? Musculoskeletal issues like knee problems are like the bread and butter of the VA disability claims, extremely common, making up about 35 to 40% of the service-connected conditions. The VA usually dishes out a 10% rating for knee flexion limitations, but that rating can go up or down depending on how much pain and motion loss you've got going on. These issues hit veterans from every era, but Gulf War vets might feel it more due to the physical demands of their service. If you're dealing with this, make sure to show up for your C&P exams. The VA's decisions hinge a lot on what these examiners find, so you want to make sure that they get the full picture of your condition. The seventh most common VA disability, paralysis of the sciatic nerve, your body's troublemaker when back issues come into play. This nerve often gets tangled up in VA disability ratings because it's tied so closely to back and neck problems. If you've got a back or neck condition, the VA's got to check for any neurological side effects, like, you guessed it, paralysis of the sciatic nerve. This can lead to things like losing some movement of your limbs or feeling like parts of your body are on a permanent coffee break. Now, here's the fun part. The VA usually throws out a 10% rating for sciatic nerve issues, and they've got this handy system where they slap a mild, moderate, or severe label on your condition. Problem is, they often lead towards mild, when, let's be honest, things might be a bit more intense. But hey, that's where you come in. Lay down your own evidence and show them just how much this condition is cramping your style. The VA's criteria? Let's just say it's about as clear as mud. Mild gets you 10%, moderate lands you 20%, and severe, well, you'll see something higher. But here's the kicker. Your rating might just depend on how thorough or not your examiner's was. Sometimes it's as simple as checking a box, and boom, you're labeled mild when you're feeling anything but. Your evidence can make all the difference. This is your shot to lay it all out and show how much this nerve issue is throwing a wrench in your day to day. Which generation of veterans are most affected by sciatic nerve issues and why? Vietnam vets tend to get hit with sciatic nerve issues more often than Gulf War vets, even though the latter are no strangers to back and neck problems. This could be thanks to our old friend Agent Orange, which is linked to conditions like diabetes. And diabetes? It loves to mess with your nerves, leading to problems like peripheral neuropathy, which can mimic sciatic nerve issues. So, those Vietnam vets might be dealing with a double whammy. Before we dive into the next condition, let's not forget that those issues don't just play favorites with certain wars. Whether you were in combat or not, these conditions can still come knocking. So don't think you're off the hook just because you didn't serve during a specific conflict. The eighth most common VA disability, limitation of motion in the ankle. Now let's take a little pivot, literally. Limitation of motion in the ankle is a biggie, especially for Gulf War vets. This one's all about how much you can move that ankle of yours. And the VA's got diagnostic code 5271 on the case. They'll hit you with a 10% rating if it's just a moderate issue. But if your ankle's really putting up a fight, you might see 20%. Of course, as with most things VA, the criteria can be as clear as fog, so there's room to argue if you think your rating's not cutting it. The ninth most common VA disability, migraines. And no, we're not talking about your garden variety headache. These are the kind that make you want to curl up in a dark room and wait for the world to stop spinning. Migraines often get linked to TBI, which is traumatic brain injury. And the VA's got a whole system for rating these based on how often they strike and how much they mess up your day. If your TBI's main claim to fame is migraines, the VA will often rate the TBI under the migraines code. But there's more. Secondary service connection is a big deal here. Got a neck condition that's giving you migraines? Those migraines can be service connected too. That's probably why migraines are such a common issue on the list, whether they're standing on their own or piggybacking on something else like TBI. The 10th most common VA disability, degenerative arthritis of the spine. You might be thinking, didn't we cover spine issues already? Well, the VA likes to keep things interesting by rating arthritis and strain issues separately, each with its own code. Arthritis ratings are usually on the lower side because they're based on the joint involvement and whether it's a major or minor joint. But if you've also got limited range of motion or are dealing with incapacitating episodes, the VA might rate you under whatever gives you the best outcome. This can get a bit technical, so if you're scratching your head wondering if you're getting the right rating, it's a good idea to reach out to someone who knows the ropes, whether it's an attorney or a veterans organization. They can help you figure out if your rating is on point or if there's a case for bumping it up. Even though we've covered a lot of ground today, remember, each of these conditions could be a deep dive on its own. I hope this gives you a good starting point. And just because a condition is common doesn't mean your case is a walk in the park. You've still got to show a link between your service and your condition. Keep those three magic ingredients in mind: a current condition, something that happened during your service, and the connection between the two. You know, there are claims that are considered low hanging fruit, and this next video covers all of them.